Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 190 of the Sticks in the Six podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Forbes, here with my co-host, Peter Barricchini. And man, episode 190. We don't have much to talk about this week as the Four Nations face-off has taken up all of the hockey world. But before we get into all of that, how are you doing this week, Peter?
Doing great. I know we were just discussing off air how we're completely done with winter right now after the onslaught, and I know you're talking about how tractors or the snowplows totally ruined your driveway, having to give you more to shovel. Honestly, dude, it was just mayhem. It was just absolute mayhem. Seeing everything just pile up. It was absolutely insane. It's literally walking outside, it's shoulder level, and I can't remember the last time there was snow that was shoulder level to me. And I'm about 6 feet, and that was a pretty massive pile of snow.
I was going to say this is the second time this year I think here in London we've had shoulder depth after shoveling on the side of the driveway. So I got the old from Oakley. Got the old Dad, make sure the piles are nice and high. So the back didn't appreciate it too much, but we got it done. We got it cleared up as much as possible, and we're. I think it's about time that we bring in some of that warmer weather. But outside of that, I mean, you want to talk about warmer weather and spring coming in. How much of a debacle are the Toronto Blue Jays right now?
Oh God,
dude.
I knew you were probably going to go there.
We're a Toronto podcast. We have to dive in quickly to the fact that there might not be any Vladimir Guerrero in Toronto this year. There's a very good chance that there is no Vladimir Guerrero in Toronto this year.
I kind of wish we were a Jays podcast, because this could take up a whole entire episode in regards to Vladdy and the Jays. And I'm going to be short and sweet about it, because I am done with Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. Both of them need to go. I'm just at an absolute loss for words right now. This is a guy that I believe he was brought in by Alex Anthopoulos. I think he was scouted by him.
He was brought on as a 14 or 15-year-old. They were out scouting him. Yeah.
International signing. You brought him in. He's a homegrown talent. Same with Bo Bichette. These two guys are going to be the faces of the franchise, more so Vladdy, because the name recognition and all of that. And there's a lot of debate about what he's worth, and I could understand that. Is he worth the money that Shohei Ohtani's getting, Juan Soto? Probably not. But the fact that you were able to go the distance and be happy to be a part of the conversation topic about being a finalist for both Ohtani and Soto, as Atkins just wants those participation ribbons. You had the money to go after those two guys. Premier players, franchise players altering. Obviously, you would want them on your team. But if you had the money to go after those two guys, you definitely have at least $500 million to go after Vladdy. And then there's the whole rumor or the talks about they were never even close. Vladdy shifted his number, still wasn't in the Jays' favor. At that point, right then and there, you had 2 years to extend Vladdy. You have no leverage if you're Ross Atkins whatsoever. If you're going to sign him, and if I'm Vladdy, I'm going to be I'm going to take the best offer available. And if he has a good season and the Jays still lowball him, he's gone. He's gone. They totally squandered one of the top players in baseball, really, for I don't know what. I really don't see how this is going to work in their favor. Just the sheer incompetence from those two guys is absolutely abysmal right now. I mean, I'm still going to be a Vladdy fan. I love the guy. I love him. I love his personality. I love his play on the field. And the front office just screwed it over. And this is a reason why I believe they were both with the Cleveland Guardians organization before they came over here. And look at the Guardians right now with them out of the picture. Now we got them, and look at the mess that we're in right now. This is going to take a long time to clear up, because we're going to be at the bottom. We're going to have to draft and develop again. And I'm just absolutely gutted to hear the news that he may no longer be a J. There's still a possibility, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I mean, short and sweet. You've got a guy who wants to be there. He's voiced on multiple occasions that he wants to be a Blue Jay for life, wants to play his entire career in the Jays uniform. You've just gone out, made huge changes to the ballpark. Ticket prices have skyrocketed to the point that they're nearly unaffordable to the average Joe. Season ticket holders saw a major jack in their prices, and you've done absolutely nothing except for regressed over the last 3 seasons. So you played your cards early with Ohtani. You were a pawn in that negotiation. You played your cards again with Juan Soto. You were a pawn in that negotiation, and to know that you're not even close, it's definitely not the way that Toronto fan base wants to feel. But here we are having the conversation at the beginning of a hockey podcast, nonetheless. I'm talking about,
like you said, we're a Toronto team.
Jr.
Toronto podcast too,
Oh yeah, you see the Vernon Wells jersey back there.
There you go.
We got some love for the Jays. I don't
know how much love I'm going to have for them in the near future, unless certain 2 names are out the door. But yeah, I mean, and one other thing too. Ever since they took over, what was the biggest moment that this team had? Basically, a playoff appearance during the COVID shortened season, and losing a playoff berth in the final game where you had absolutely everybody pop off. I think it was like Teoscar, Bo, Marcus Semien was still on the team. Springer had a good year. Vladdy had a fantastic year. I think he was in the conversation with MVP for Ohtani, I think, at that point. Aside from those 2 things, what good has the organization has been done under these 2 guys? We got cup holders in the 100 section. Let's go. Yeah, I'm all for cup holders, but at the same time, you know what I want more? I want a damn pennant. I want a championship. I want to see the replication of what the Toronto Raptors did.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little bit longer before we see even that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, before we get into the Four Nations Cup, I know we got Patrick here joining us tonight and already in the comments, which I appreciate, Patrick. We'll get to your comments in just a moment here. But we got to bring this up as well. Bobby Hull was recently posthumously diagnosed with CTE, stage 2 CTE. He is now, I believe, the 18th of 19 players tested posthumously from the NHL to have said neurological breakdown, essentially neurological disease, which, I mean, say what you will, there's obviously a correlation between NHL hockey hitting, and eventual CTE, whether Gary Bettman wants to admit it or not, or bring light to it, and there's a ton of advocates out there right now having the conversation that Gary's not willing to have. So we want to bring it up, not so much to report on it necessarily, but more to kind of bring light to the fact that this is an ongoing conversation. We've seen it with the NFL. We are seeing it with the NHL. You're talking about some of the best stars from back in the day that are now posthumously being diagnosed with CTE. And we know the effects. We've seen the effects on guys like Junior Seau and even Bobby Hull's wife saying that there was times where he was not in his right mind, and it does, how much it does affect the person while they are still alive, and how it can affect them. So it is something that we should talk about. It's a conversation that needs to be had. There are ways to create safety while still maintaining the integrity of the game. It's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think it's got to get to those higher ranks at some point, hopefully in the near future, before it's too late for many others.
I was about to say there's only one person that really needs to have this conversation, and that's Gary Bettman. Because I don't know how long you can avoid the science and avoid the facts that there is this correlation between head trauma and hits to the head and CTE. I mean, the NFL, that's been notable for like a lot of headshots or head hits in the past, and they've actually came out and said, you know what, this is a real thing. Other sports leagues have, done the research behind it. How many more players is it going to take for him to say, or for him to brush it off, and how many more players are still going to be diagnosed with it afterwards before he actually comes to this conclusion and admit that he was wrong this whole entire time.
Yeah,
Like
it's going to take a
really
long time.
disappointing.
It's going to take a long time, and it's unfortunate because it's people that are reluctant to have that conversation, right? And for the longest time, the NFL was reluctant to have that conversation until it became a major note in the media in terms of players or former players going on to have events that either were tragic endings or led to other kinds of endings as well. But yeah. Yes, Patrick, it should be a major. It should be majors, absolutely. Lastly, before we get into the Four Nations Cup here, Kevin Weeks, who seems to be the breaker of news in the NHL these days, in speaking to Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly and other sources involved, I can confirm that there was a recent meeting in New York City with a group expressing their interest in bringing an NHL expansion team to New Orleans. So we will see where that goes. Obviously, we're not gonna dive too much into it, but it would mean that there would be a 33rd team in the NHL. I don't know how much deeper we want to go with the. I mean, it creates more jobs, I guess, is the one way to look at it. But it certainly starts. You get to a point where you start to water down the talent level at a major league level. Yes, Patrick, hockey is hockey.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is the mentality that a lot of people have at this point. Hockey is hockey. There are ways to hold that integrity of the game and still make changes for the safety of those involved. I agree that hockey is hockey. I don't think we ever want to change hockey to a major extent, but I do think that we need to take the right steps in making sure that we create safe work practices for those working within the game. Anyways, we got to get to the Four Nations Cup. We got the championship game tomorrow. It's Canada USA. If you missed their previous game, it started off 3 tilts in the first 9 seconds. Yes, Patrick. Yes,
it is going to be good.
Tomorrow is going to be excellent. Yeah. It's going to be great hockey. If you haven't already, 10.1 million viewers, concurrent viewers. That's insane. That's more than any game outside of the Stanley Cup final since I believe 2014 was the stat. So take that into consideration. And
it's beating out Stanley Cup finals.
It's beating out Stanley Cup finals. The crazy part about this entire thing is the fact that there are rules they are still working on. Given some of the injuries and some of the illnesses that have happened, we've seen, obviously with Cale Makar out earlier in the tournament, we saw Canada bring in an extra. We're seeing the U.S. now. They're flying in Quinn Hughes. Imagine being a team where you can fly in Quinn Hughes as your potential extra.
So I think Quinn Hughes is unable to attend, because he's still practicing in Vancouver and he's not fully cleared yet. So that's why I think they brought in Pesce and Tage Thompson.
Okay. I did see Pesce and Thompson.
Yeah.
I was under the that's
what created a lot of confusion though, because everyone said, oh yeah, Quinn Hughes is flying out, but he's still in Vancouver practicing. So that's where there was like a lot of this confusion still, and I'm even trying to piece it together too. I'm like, what actually is going on?
Patrick's on it. Hughes is not playing, so that's a bonus. But regardless, the point is that imagine being
this
a
is
team
made for
where
a Canada-US final.
These are the guys that you can fly in at any point because you have injuries. I love it. You saw Scott Wheeler today on X talking about the possible or how crazy it would be to have an ESPN 30 for 30. They're having a 2-episode kind of docu-series on the Four Nations face-off, which is going to be insane. Obviously, we've seen guys mic'd up already. Brad Marchand was mic'd up at one point for Canada while he was chirping the Finns. You had Brady Tkachuk, who was also mic'd up, talking to the refs about how crazy the start was to that Canada-US final. And there was one thing, Patrick, that you set up here early on. Tough to beat Canada twice. I want to start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Tough to beat Canada twice. I fully agree. The shitty part about it was that you had Sidney Crosby, who's 26-0 in a Canada jersey. Obviously, they get the loss against the U.S. It was a game I'm not sure they were ready for the intensity right off the hop, but it is going to be tough to beat Canada twice, and it is now you are on home ice if you are the U.S. We know the Boo Birds are going to be out because they were out in Montreal. It's going to be an intense start to the game. There may not be any fights. Who knows? Um, but it's gonna be a hell of a start, Peter. Outside of JT Miller maybe punching himself in the face again, what are we looking for in the first period here for tomorrow's game, Canada USA in the championship?
Well, based on that group chat that the Kachucks and Miller were in, I think if he had to pick a different fighting partner, it wouldn't have been Colton Parayko. But the fact that he took a whack, and Parayko was there, I think Miller had no choice but to take the exception, and he ended up paying for it. I mean, when you're going up against like a guy like Colton Parayko, you're not going to win, basically. Yeah, I mean, like you said, the intensity is going to be there. I mean, that first game I was absolutely like, I don't even know. I don't even have the words to describe it because I'm like, okay, fight off the hop. Hagel and Kachuk. Hagel with the takedown. Okay, great start. Then Brady and Sam go at it, and then Miller and Parayko like literally 8 seconds after that. So it's like I have no idea. Like this is what you wanted. This is like that basically 9 to 10 seconds reignited the rivalry between these two nations right now, and I'm just excited for it. I'm excited to see what's going to happen, and the intensity is still going to be there, but I want to know to how much of a degree because Charlie McAvoy, who had 4 hits, heavy ones on both Crosby and McDavid, he's not up because of an infection in his shoulder. The Kachucks are dealing with certain ailments as well. I want to know how intense they're going to be. Probably not major, but they were the ones laying the boom. Like they were literally the Bash brothers from the Mighty Ducks. And you may not have that same level of physicality, but you're going to have that pressure. You're going to have that intensity. They're going to be heavy on the forecheck, regardless of who's going to be on the ice. And Canada, I don't think they were ready for it. I just think they need to be well prepared and they need to match that intensity and lay the body. And I know maybe some guys on the team aren't willing to do that. But the first game when we saw Nathan MacKinnon basically lay the boom, like first shift that he was on, I want to see that. I know you're not going to see a lot of hits from Crosby and McDavid, but they're mixing it up. Fine. I want to see Marchand go in flying on home ice because that's basically his arena. And I want to see him, in the Canadian jersey, not necessarily like say that he wasn't great in the first 2 games, but I want to see that intensity and pride from him, like everybody else on that team. Yeah, I'm just really waiting to see what's going to happen because, like you said, it's tough, or like even Patrick said, it's tough to beat Canada twice. And the last time that the U.S. beat Canada in a round robin was the 2010 Olympics, and they met each other in the final, and guess what happened? Sidney Crosby golden goal, baby. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm also going to say this right now about the 4 nations while we're still talking about it as a whole. I'm pretty sure myself. I'm pretty sure you had your skepticisms about the tournament as well. Everybody did because it kind of felt like not necessarily a cash grab, but the NHL grasping at straws on how to make a really good best on best. You got an international format. We talked about how it's not really best on best because you're still missing some best players. But this is a major success right now. I will eat my words and say that, you know what? I was a skeptic at first, but they're doing a damn good job right now marketing it. And now this sets the stage for the Olympics next year. I don't know why it took them so long to make this best on best or get back to international play with the best players and not players from like the NCAA, AHL, minor leagues, what have you. These are the best players in the world. And now we're seeing that, and I hope we continue to see that in the near future. I know it's already talks about the Olympics, another World Cup as well. Let's bring it. This is what we wanted to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't go wrong. The expectation was that it was going to be a Canada U.S. final.
Has to be.
That being said, I think the intensity levels of the Finns and the Swedes and having them there, obviously, there's other guys that you would love to see at an international tournament like this. Whether or not they were going to be beat, like even the Germans with Draisaitl,
Stutzla.
Stutzla, Czechia would have been good to have, Slovakia.
Hmm.
But this is we talked about it early. This is the four nations face off. You've got four of the top nations in hockey right now. Um, you know, the Swedes came out. They showed up against Canada. The Finns came out. They even though they went down early, they showed up against Canada late. They made it an intense finish. Um, in terms of the U.S., it was a build up, man. This was what everybody was excited for, and all of a sudden, you've got that in the final. It's going to be a huge game in Boston, so it's going to be even bigger from that standpoint. And like, I know we don't like talking about it, but the political aspect of it all too, like that's all tying in. The best thing I saw come from the whole thing was when Brandon Hagel said after the game against the US, he said, I was losing sleep early on because I didn't know what it was going to be like. If this was just going to be another type of all-star game, I felt like I was going to be out of place because I was going to bring it, and I was going to bring it all, and I was going to bring the intensity, and he sure as hell brought the intensity. I love what Brandon Hagel's brought to
Yeah.
the Canadian lineup thus far. And I truly believe that every guy's kind of had that mentality.
I
And
question some of the roster decisions, but I really like Hagel. I
yeah,
think that was one of the players that you had to bring
yeah.
because of the intensity, and he's one of the other lone players that could actually fight to drop the gloves.
Well, and you
And we saw
saw,
that with Matthew.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Patrick, I agree. I think Hagel won that first fight. That second tilt between Brady and Bennett was kind of a toss up, and then obviously Pareko, JT Miller. I mean, JT Miller basically knocked
Yeah.
himself out, so
Canada
that
won
was a
2 out of the
good.
3 fights.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now it's going to be time for Canada to win on the ice, to win the game, to win that coveted first Four Nations Face-Off Cup. Um, I think what's going to be interesting, there's going to be a lot of talking points here. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy being out, how it plays out for Boston beyond the tournament. He's now got an infection, they're saying, which,
Mhm.
we've seen actually, friend of the show, Gavin Bryant, had an issue when he had shoulder surgery. It led to an infection in his shoulder as well. So it's actually pretty, I don't want to say common, but it happens more often than we hear about. So obviously he's held up in Boston Gen right now, or Mass Gen or whatever. And so obviously he's going to miss that. Um, the injury bug has been going around a little bit with Brady Tkachuk was not present at skate today, so we don't know where that's going to go. I doubt that he's going to miss a game or an opportunity to play against Canada. You got Matthew Tkachuk, who's
Yeah.
who's kind of been bumped around a little bit, and then obviously Auston Matthews is the one that we are more focused on as well. Being that it is not an injury that is tied to what he has previously been injured
Mhm.
with this season. That said, an upper body injury is never something you want to hear when you're talking about the top guy in your on your roster. But what I want to ask you, and this has kind of been a talking point for many around the league. One of the conversations right now from Mike Sullivan was that Auston Matthews is a leader that leads by example. He leads on the ice. He's a quiet guy. He's not one that's going to come into the room and rip into everybody and kind of talk about that. The question for you is that we now have seen Matthews, we've now seen Nylander, we've now seen Marner in those big game opportunities. This is where we want to see them because we want to get a feel for how they're going to perform. Now you're talking about some of the best players in the game. So Marner, Patrick mentioned it. Marner on the third line, that's a possibility and that's a
Mhm.
likelihood, and that's not a problem. You're playing with the likes of McDavid. You're playing with the likes of Braden Point, who's a Stanley Cup winner. You're playing with, guys of that magnitude, Crosby's. But we haven't seen the Auston Matthews that we're so used to seeing offensively. We haven't seen an Auston Matthews that has made a ton of noise in this tournament thus far. As a Leaf fan, as somebody who wants this team to take that next step in the playoffs, has Auston Matthews' play at this tournament so far been a little bit worrisome, I guess, especially when you're talking about the possibility of these big games and what they mean for for the representation of your country internationally.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a rough go for all three, really. I mean, I think that Nylander, he had a couple bad turnovers and bad penalties early on, but he got a couple of assists and he assisted on the game winner and the ultimately meaningless game for Sweden, but he kind of picked it up later on. Marner started off hot. He got that game-winning goal. Beautiful snipe and great feed by Sidney Crosby right then and there. But again, he hasn't quite gelled and meshed with McDavid because I think they're two different type of players. McDavid is always going. Marner likes to slow the play down a little bit. So seeing him on the third line kind of makes sense because he is good defensively. He can chip in with that skill. Is it enough to be with McDavid? I don't know. Point plays with a little bit more of that pace, which is good for him or for McDavid. But for Matthews, I mean, yeah, you would expect him to basically be that offensive producer. But then again, aside from that blowout against Finland, it's been tough to come by goal-wise for Team USA. I mean, they only got technically 2 against the Maple Leafs, against Canada. Both goals really should have been stopped by Jordan Binnington. And then there was that empty netter. Then there was the one goal that Chris Kreider scored 10 seconds in, but that was the lone goal for Team USA. I know Matthews has had a ton of chances, ton of opportunities, crossbars post, like we've seen that quite a bit this season as well when he came back and he was looking good. And then the puck just wouldn't go in, bad bounces. But I think at some point, like, obviously tomorrow is the one time for him to try and connect and make his presence felt as one of the elite goal scorers in this league. Am I going to be too upset if he doesn't score? No. But when it comes crunch time in the playoffs, you're going to have to step it up. Like, this is basically Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, essentially. And now with Matthews and Marner going toe-to-toe, Marner especially is considering how he needs to elevate his play in the playoffs. Hopefully, both players can try and play that back-and-forth mentality where Matthews is going on one shift and Marner's going on another. And again, hopefully he's able to at least, I mean, I really don't want him to score because we want Canada to win, right? But at the same time, if he does score, that's going to be good for him. Good for the fact that if there is a big time situation where you need a goal, you can count on him. And same thing goes with Marner. We saw him score that overtime winner. That should elevate his confidence a little bit more where he hasn't looked great in the playoffs. And when the games matter, he's kind of gone quiet. In this game, too, I want to see how well he does because he's been the most scrutinized Maple Leaf, even more so than Matthews and Nylander. You need Matthews to get the goals, but at the same time, Marner needs to boost his confidence a little bit more. But overall, it's good that it's not the same injury for Matthews. It's a different one. And if he's able to get back to that shooting mentality, because I believe his line mates are Jake Gensel and Jack Hughes, right? Jake Gensel likes to shoot the puck a lot as well. Same with Jack, but he's more of a playmaker as well. I just feel that there's a good balance, but I think he needs to find those lanes a little bit more and push himself into those scoring opportunities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Also, just a quick update. Elliot Friedman was on with Kipper and Bourne earlier today and said that the Bruins are not happy with the way that Charlie McAvoy's injury was handled. Didn't feel like he got the right treatment.
Saw that.
Kind of understandable considering where they are in the standings. And obviously Charlie McAvoy is a major piece for them. So that, obviously we'll keep an eye on that as that continues to progress. Beyond that, I agree with you. I mean, I think we'd be naive to think that people don't know we want Canada to win this tournament.
That's riding on this game.
Yeah, so obviously, I wouldn't mind seeing Matthews score the only U.S. goal in a 5-1 win, but I don't want to see it where he's he's going to take the game over as we we'd love to see,
Mhm.
and going from there. But at the same time, we do want to see that next level from Mitch Marner. I think that's one of the big conversation pieces as well. Like this is an opportunity for Mitch Marner to be in a big game, to learn to handle that big game workload, that mentality. Patrick mentioned the possibility of him being on the third line. I think that's a perfect spot for him, because you get the opportunity to see how the Nathan McKinnons handled themselves, how the Cale Makars handled themselves, how the Sidney Crosby's going to be 38 in August. He's leading the tournament in points right now, and he's likely playing somewhat injured based on how he entered this tournament. The insanity that kind of delivers into how he takes care of his body, how he plays the game, his focus, his determination, his intensity, that all needs to be consumed by Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner and Auston Matthews haven't spoke since they got off the plane for this tournament.
Yep,
So
they're rivals. They're enemies.
they are rivals. They're not teammates right now. So that's where Marner's got to lean on these guys, and he's been there through junior. He's been there at the World Juniors. He's been in those big game moments. He hasn't had that same opportunity outside of Game 7s in the first round, where obviously the Leafs didn't get shit done. So with that in mind, all that considered, this is a Stanley Cup final for him.
Mhm.
This is something that Marner needs to take in and absorb every little aspect of how these guys prepare for that next level. I agree, Patrick. I think Marner is a complete player. He is a 200-foot player. I constantly, when we have these conversations, I go back to when we had the Sheriff on and he talked about, maybe Auston Matthews isn't the guy in Toronto. Maybe he's not the end all and be all of making this team take that next step. And even with Marner being a complete player, maybe he's not that guy either. And I think this tournament is a great opportunity to kind of gauge that, to kind of see where both of these players are at, knowing very well that they're still very young by our standard, right?
Yeah.
Like they're still very, very early in their careers, albeit 9 years into their NHL careers.
In their primes, basically, yeah.
Yeah, but we want to see them take that next step, and I think anything less than getting into the second round and even past the second round is an ultimate failure for the Leafs this season, and it's a failure for Matthews and Marner, especially based on the intensity level of the games that you're playing in right now at the Four Nations tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you brought up a good point too, where you're seeing. I mean, he's getting a front row view to Sidney Crosby. He played on the line with McDavid for multiple games. And you're seeing how well all these guys compose themselves. McDavid was one game away from winning a Stanley Cup. Crosby's won multiple. McKinnon has his chip. So I'm even going to throw a guy like Braden Point and Mark Stone in there. Those are guys with Stanley Cup rings to their resume. And for Mitch Marner to see how they act on and off the ice, on the bench, and be teammates with them, hopefully that is a reflection of, I'm not saying that Mitch Marner has bad character, but the mentality and mindset when it comes to the type of style that's needed to win in the playoffs, where you got to grind it out. You got to dig deep. You got to be intense. You got to finish your checks. You got to go into the corners in the tough areas. Seeing that a little bit from Marner right now, again, just want a little bit more consistency. But if he's able to take what he's learned from those guys on this team and use it when he basically comes back here and puts on the blue and white, that to me is going to be huge for him. And I think I'm pretty sure you had a piece come out too about how that goal should really boost his confidence about, thriving and playing in big moments.
Mm-hmm.
We really need, again, that Mitch Marner is the one player that we really haven't seen that from. Again, Matthews has gone quiet in elimination games as well, but Nylander has stepped up. Matthew Nice has come up with some clutch goals in elimination games, as we saw this past playoff or last playoff as well. So it's like
John Tavares has too.
John Tavares too. It's just we need him as a homegrown player, Toronto boy, wearing that maple leaf. We seen the video of him as a kid on City TV, where he needs to be that guy that they could rely on as well. And again, we know he's a playmaker. He's got to get greedy and shoot the puck a little bit more because we saw him snipe that. That went opposite side of Philip Gustafson, and that was a perfectly executed shot. So if he's able to do that, I think it's going to be a big win for him in the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things too you have to think about is that, you know, we forget so often because they are in such a limelight in Toronto that this guy wants to be here, right?
He does.
And we are.
And I don't even think he would want to sign anywhere else next season if he's a free agent.
Even you and I were, you know, we could be tough on him. When Alex was here, Alex could be tough on him. We've all been guilty of being too tough on this guy. At the same time, you know, we forget that this guy's hard on himself, and I think like there's been a point. I believe right now even he's taken himself off social media. He doesn't engage with that kind of stuff right now, because he has an expectation of himself of what he can and can't do, and I think, you know, it becomes problematic, especially in a market like Toronto, to kind of have your face out there and reading everything that you're going through at the same time, right? So I think you know, it's not ideal. It's not ideal to kind of have to you know, deal with all those kind of all the outside noise and stuff that you deal with in a market like Toronto. You know, Patrick's right. In Canada, you have to win. You have that the expectation, especially for a team with that kind of history, especially for a team that hasn't done it in 58 years, as I was kindly reminded by a Pittsburgh Penguins fan recently. I'm sure you guys saw that interaction that I had with said Penguins fan, where he basically said that in the Sweden game, Mitch Marner acted like a baby, and we're all going to forget about it because he scored the game winner. So I kind of posted back 4 pictures of Crosby complaining to the refs in his early days, letting him know that, you know, people forget that this, you know, it takes time to grow up in this game. And I just wrote back my favorite line from Superbad: "People don't forget." So
I was just thinking that, Greg. Yeah. It's soccer. Yeah, it's soccer.
So anyways, you know, it kind of had a bit of a back and forth, and I know said Penguins fan, and I know there's a constant state of homerism, and that you know, they take things very personally, and I love egging these guys on, right? Yeah. Anytime I love having a good hockey conversation, but anytime I can egg on another fan base because they take things so personally and don't know how to handle the conversation, I love just poking the bear, right? So I was poking the bear until he just lost it, and I think he texted his brother off screen and was like, "Why is this guy being so hard on Sidney Crosby? He's the greatest player ever." Anyways, it was some kind of bullshit like that. But regardless, Marner wants to be there. He wants to succeed. I do believe that Mitchie's going to have a big game against the U.S. I think he's going to have that extra little bit of intensity. The fact is, the Canadians lost in a round robin game. We are talking about a championship game, a chance to come home to your very own dressing rooms. Think about the Sam Bennetts who get to go back to Florida and flash that gold medal in the face of Matthew Tkachuk. Think about the Mitch Marners who get to go back to the dressing room in Toronto and say, "Hey Willie, hey Auston,
hey Maddie,
take a look at this." Think about Marchand, who gets to go over to Mass Gen at the end of the game and say, "Hey Charlie, look at this."
Yeah.
It's those kind of things. Patrick, will Reinhart score?
That's a good question. He's, for all the talk about, like, you know, Mitch Marner being inconsistent, where's Sam Reinhart been this whole entire time?
Yeah. You know what? He's been a playmaker. He's taken on a different role. He's been a playmaker. This guy's on a line with two of the best Canadian players to play the game in the last 30 years.
You're gonna have to take on different roles. That's the thing. We know he's a goal scorer on the power, and he's a power play merchant. He can score shorthanded.
But
that's the thing too. Maybe it would.
Yeah,
that's the one thing. Maybe I want to see a little bit more of him on the PK. But other than that, yeah, he's been pretty quiet. Considering a guy that's supposed to be in the top 6, but again, yeah, it is
Patrick,
what it is.
If this is for a DraftKings bet that you're gonna lay, I say go for it. I say throw a tenner down on Reinhart to score. I like it. I might chase you on that as well. Yeah, I like it. I say go for it. I think he's due as well. I agree. I think he's due. I'd like to see it. Since we're on the topic as well,
perfect segue.
Thank you, Patrick. But quick word from our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook. This NHL season has been as predictable as a puck rolling on its edge. No one knows where it's going. But that just means there's time for your favorite team to figure things out and games left for you to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. Or if you're going to ride with Patrick here, throw a little tenner on Reinhart to score in the championship game. He's due. Why not see what we can do with that over on DraftKings? And if you are new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. NHL and NHL team marks are the property of the NHL and its teams. Copyright NHL 2025. All rights are reserved. Well, yeah, I think that's kind of where we've segued into the final game on tomorrow night. It should be a big game. We're gonna jump on the Reinhart to tuck anytime goal scorer over on DraftKings Sportsbook. So we'll ride that with Patrick here. Outside of that, I do think it's going to be a big game. I think it's going to be the intensity level is going to be there. That I truly believe that both Kachucks are going to be in the lineup, ready to go. I think they're going to be booming around the same way that they were in the round robin game. I think the Canadians are going to come out with a little bit more intensity on that level as well. And I think the Canadians look for the Canadians to take this one. It means way more than anybody knows. For the U.S. to beat Canada in a championship hockey game, it hasn't happened often, and I think when you go down the list of Canadians on that team, their championship pedigree with Stanley Cups. Patrick mentioned 14 cups to the 2 Stanley Cups for the U.S. side. It's going to be a different story this time around. Peter, you got any predictions for tomorrow night's game?
I hate to call him an X factor or a difference maker because we already know that he is one, but Cale Makar. I mean, he was out of that game against Team USA, and that was a big blow to their defense because of the fact that they're down a guy who can really move the puck. He's their top puck mover, power play QB, you name it. This is a guy that's a very big difference maker on the back end. And when he came back into the lineup against Finland, you saw what they were missing against Team USA. So I think the little bit more push of offense, speed, playmaking from the back end is going to be a big difference maker for Canada this time around. And the U.S. are without, is going to be without McAvoy, one of their top defenders, big minute eater. Again, the possibility of Quinn Hughes still not being there. I mean, I will say this: Jacob Slavin has been fantastic for Team USA. I mean, he really made life miserable, taking away lanes for every single Canadian player out there. Um, it's still going to be tough because they do shut down very well. But I think if they're able to break through the defense and don't stay on the perimeter too much, I think it's going to be advantage Canada, because when they get to the middle of the ice, they are more dangerous, more so than Team USA. And if you're able to solve Hellebuck, because if anything, we know how poorly Hellebuck has played in big games, is this going to be that game where maybe pressure gets to him a little bit like it has in the playoffs? I don't know. We talk about Mitch Marner needing big time moments in big games. This is one for Connor Hellebuck as well. I mean, you hate to say that because of what he's doing in the regular season, but it is true. If this is a game 7 of a Stanley Cup final, the Winnipeg Jets haven't really moved on and haven't had great success, even Connor Hellebuck in the playoffs. So I'm willing to see, I want to see, obviously he's been a big difference maker for Team USA to this point. If they're going to win, he's going to have to backstop them again. So those are my 2 X factors, difference makers of what I'm expecting for this game as well. And like you mentioned, it's probably a good time for Matthews to find the back of the net again. Hopefully it's in a losing cause, but at the same time, I mean, this could get him going when he gets back as well. I know he was, he had quite a few apples heading into the break or to this tournament, but it's time for him to start finding the back of the net again. So that's going to be big.
Let's not kid ourselves. It's going to come down to Jordan Binnington and what he can do in that Canadian net.
Yeah.
This may be the weakest that Canadian goaltending has ever looked in international play. It's been a long time since Canada has been weak at the point in between the pipes. And Jordan Binnington has looked suspect on some plays. There's a handful of goals that he'd love back in this tournament. This is going to be a tell-all for Canadian goaltending, and maybe the mishap of leaving Logan Thompson off of this lineup as well. That said, they're in the championship game, and Binnington's been there before, and he needs to get it done for this Canadian squad. There's no outscoring the Americans. You need your goaltender to come up big in a game like this, and it's going to fall on the shoulders of Jordan Binnington. He's going to be my X factor going into tomorrow night's game. I think he needs to get it done, and he needs to set the tone early that he is in it, and he's focused, and he's ready to take away some of the high danger opportunities for this strong American club. Outside of that, I'm going to throw a prediction at you. I think 4-2 final for Team Canada, an empty netter. Yeah, Patrick, one game. It's down to one game. I'd love to see a best 2 out of 3, but it's down to one game. But I do think 4-2 final for Canada with the empty netter. So outside of that, feel free to leave your predictions. We'd love to hear them. We can talk about it next episode 191. Before we close it out here, though, we do have a little bit of Leafs news, and albeit it might not be that important given that, they're going to get 3 players back following this tournament. But Alex Steeves finally gets the call up. To the big club. Obviously, the NHL clubs restarted their activities. I believe it was today that they got everything back kind of going and heading back into the regular season here. Alex Steeves is the Marlies all-time point leader, all-time goal leader, and now he's going to get a solid opportunity with the Leafs. Hopefully, we're not talking 79 minutes on the fourth line, but hopefully he'll finally get a strong opportunity with the big club to see what he can actually do. He's been a loyal customer down in the AHL for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we're gonna see where that goes. But Patrick, 3-2 Canada. I love it. I love a close game. If it's 3-2, I'm all for it. I think the empty netter gets in.
It's more nail biting.
You saw Crosby take that hit at center ice before he tucked that empty netter. I think he takes another one. We'll see. But he's definitely going to be a little bit beaten and bruised going back to Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins following this tournament. But anyways, Peter, before we close it out, what are your thoughts on Alex Steeves getting the recall? Is this just more of a paper move with Matthews, Marner, and Nylander away at the tournament? Or are we actually going to get a strong opportunity now? We've seen yet Calle Yarncrow back on the ice with them again today as well. Um, is this a paper move, or are we going to see a little bit from Alex Steeves heading into the last part of the season here?
I really hope this is where we start to see more of Alex Steeves. I mean, I was at the game against Laval recently, and so was Craig Berube, apparently. He was at Scotiabank Arena watching that beatdown that they had against the Laval Rocket, and Steeves had a goal and 2 assists. And the big thing is that Berube said is this is an opportunity for him. Like, he needs to be good. He needs to run away with it. He needs to play his game. And that's not necessarily be a point producer, because let's face it, he's going to be in the bottom part of the lineup. I think where the Maple Leafs lack is they lack speed, they lack intensity, they lack zone time sometimes. And when you have a player, unfortunately, like Ryan Reeves, you don't get that often. So I think Steeves brings it a little bit more skill, but he still brings that drive and intensity to the bottom six with a little bit more skill. And I hope that this is the start for him where if he has one game where maybe he doesn't need to be the big point producer, because we all know who needs to do that. But if he can chip in every now and then, I think that's going to be a big win for him. It's going to be a big win for the team because they need some added depth and a little bit more speed. And he was flying out there. I mean, I was absolutely thrilled to see him play, to see, hey, what's going to happen with him? Are we going to get to see an opportunity? He had four games with a goal. Then he went cold, but then he has now 3 goals and 2 assists in 2 games since that little mini cold streak that he had. So I'm hoping that this is an opportunity for him to stick. I hope it's for players that are already on the team that are going to be scratched to be like, hey, if you're not going to play well, and this guy is, you're going to be sitting up for quite some time right now. So I hope this is good for him. I hope it's good for the Leafs. It could be a paper transaction, but I don't know. He's looked too damn good to be a paper transaction right now, especially in the AHL. So I feel like hopefully when everything is all set, we get to see him either up the middle or on the wing. I really feel that he deserves that opportunity. I think that this is great for him, and I hope that he could run away with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. 1 point in 11 NHL games. He's got 46 in 40 AHL games this season for the Toronto Marlies. So it'd be interesting to see what opportunities he gets moving forward, and hopefully it's a legitimate opportunity. Mm-hmm. Who knows what's coming? The trade deadline's just around the corner. Who knows what's coming? Too. It's there's a lot of things rolling with Brad Treliving and the Maple Leafs right now. Patrick's got Reinhart, Crosby, Hagel as the 3 goal scorers in his 3-2 win for Canada.
I like that.
Tomorrow. I think those are all solid picks.
Those are solid picks, yeah.
Lots of intensity there. I think Reinhart's going to be a strong net front presence tomorrow as well for Canada. So
I feel like we're going to see a Brad Marchand Gardens goal. I feel like we're due for that too.
I like it. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us. First live show. He says, great show. We appreciate
it, Pat.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Means a lot.
We are looking to get a few lives going back in TO as well. So if you're in the area, that is still in the works. We're working alongside a local brewery down there to try and get things going. So hopefully that's going to happen in the next little bit here. Things have kind of slowed down in the new year, so it's it'll be a good time for us to get together for a beer and a show. So outside of that, as always, it's been a pleasure for episode 190, brought to you by the fine folks at the Hockey Podcast Network, DraftKings, SeatGeek, No Name Hockey, BioSteel, and, of course, Indie Ale House. As always, for Peter and myself, we're going to be back next week for episode 191. We'll be talking a little bit more about Leafs with them being back in the regular season in the full swing of things, but we'll be sure to update you on the final, our thoughts on the final. And with that, that's all we've got for episode 190 of Sticks in the Six podcast. Until next week, go Canada, go.